You're 62 years old, you've saved $1.2 million, and you're sitting there and you're asking yourself, can I retire if I want to live on $7,000 a month for a lifestyle expense? Now in this video, I want to cover a few things. Now behind me is, I'm going to dive into our planning software for that scenario. And these blue bars represent your investments over the course of your retirement. Now, the big thing I'm going to cover in this video is how, with 3 little tweaks, we were able to make a difference to the overall picture. And in this particular case, we were able to gain $694,000, but it's not even about that, right? What it's really about is we were able to provide more confidence to this sample client so that they can live the life that they want to live. So in this video, I'm going to cover what those tweaks are, how we did it, why we did it, and ultimately I want to give some good info on things that you should be thinking about as you determine if it makes sense to make that transition into retirement. Now, one of the things that I think is really important is we have to first start to decide, what does our lifestyle look like? Now, in my example, I said you need about $7,000 a month. Well, one of the key things that you have to have before you can fully transition into retirement is you need to have a written income plan, something that is a roadmap for you to say, so where's my income coming from with each year as I move forward? Now, for obvious reasons, everyone's situation is so drastically different that this particular case study is a sample only and may or may not apply in your situation. I have also tried to limit the complexity of this one so that you can follow along. Now, let's just look at what we're dealing with in this particular example. So we've got 2 people, age 62. We've got $2 million is their net worth. So they've got $1.2 million spread out between different investment and cash accounts. And then we have a primary residence or their home that's worth $800,000. So fairly typical picture where they've got about $2 million in total net worth, and they are trying to decide if they can retire. Now, if we jump over here and we look at their income, what we've got going on here is we have 2 different Social Security amounts for both husband and wife. And then the husband also has a small pension of $500 per month for life. Now, in the expense section, this is where I was mentioning, this particular example, they wanted to have $7,000 a month that comes to them that is at their disposal. Now, that $7,000 a month in this example is separate from any tax need that comes up in the scenario. So really, in order to accomplish what this sample client wants, we actually need more than $7,000 a month because we have to accommodate taxes, which is not part of the $7,000 a month. And so we've got federal taxes built in, and in this case, this sample client's in the state of Utah. So we also have that built in. Now, as we dive in, what we can do is we can first start by saying, okay, let's look at this picture from a expense and income perspective. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jump over here to kind of a cash flow overview, and I'll zoom in for you. But ultimately, at a base level, you can see this red line represents the needed income, so the lifestyle expense need. Now, in a lot of what we do, we just want to be conservative in our projections. And so we are growing that expense by 3% every year for their entire lives. And so you can see the need, the income need that they need goes up every year. And then we have this scenario going out to age 95. Now, once again, that's for us just to be conservative, to make sure that we have confidence that the money's gonna last. Now, you can also see from this depiction that in this basic scenario, how we have it mapped out is we have all of their after-tax investments being part of their income need out of the gate. Because you'll notice that the other income, which is the green, that is a pension, and it does kick on. And so you'll see that little bit of green forever. But the other thing you'll notice is all of a sudden you have these dark blue lines that are showing up. Now, dark blue lines represent Social Security. And at a base level, in the base case scenario, what we've done is we have just said, okay, let's just, for simplicity, let's have both husband and wife turn their Social Security on at full retirement age, okay, which is 67. Now, in this case, once again, you will notice that there's a dark orange that pops into this scenario. Now, dark orange represents something we call required minimum distributions. Now, required minimum distributions will apply if you have any IRAs, 401k, 457, tax-deferred qualified retirement money. And so what happens is, depending on the year you were born and your age, it'll either start at age 73 or age 75. Now, in this case, we can see the dark orange kicks on, and over time, it slowly goes down. Now, I'm gonna show you what's happening and why. But hopefully, one of the things that I hope you're taking from this right out of the gate is, if you don't have something like this, a picture where you can look at a roadmap of what your income looks like, it's really hard to spend any money in retirement. The majority of the families that we work with have done a great job saving, and actually one of the most difficult things for them is going to be spending the money. And so we need to have every piece firing on with as much confidence as we can in order for each family to really have confidence to spend the hard-earned money that they have maybe sacrificed to save all these years. And so what I'm gonna show you is how we tweaked a few things here to arrive at a different scenario. Now, one other thing to note is, once again, to be conservative in our overall projections here. This is your investments at a base level. Over time, all we've done is we've said, if you have investments, we are growing them at a net rate of 5%. So after all fees, this particular picture is 5%. Now, I'm not telling you that that's what you should expect or anything like that. I'm simply saying, to be conservative, because we're running a picture out so long, I think it's reasonable to use 5% net to grow the money over time. Now, let me show you one other thing that becomes really important in this scenario, and it's a big game changer as well. When we start to look at tax brackets. Now, one of the things, we are currently in the Trump tax cuts of 2017. And so starting in 2018, the tax brackets, not only did they drop, but they also compressed. And so what that ended up meaning is, unless you think that taxes are going down, which is not how we think, then ultimately it might be a great time to consider trying to take advantage of the current tax situation. And so that is one of the things that we have built into this scenario. And so ultimately, what you'll notice is, as we've mapped out the taxable situation for this sample client, we can see the taxable section moving forward looks like this, okay? And I think here's the thing that I want you to kind of pay attention to, is these lines here represent different tax brackets. But you'll notice we have almost no income out of the gate. And that's because we are not, at the base case level, we're not taking Social Security, we're not taking money from IRAs, we're taking money from cash. That's it. And so out of the gate. So I want to show you the tweaks that we did. So let's go through each moving piece to help us arrive at how we were able to produce so much more value. So if we go back into our lifetime portfolio value, one of the things that gets interesting is, part of a strategy that we use a lot is to really start bucketing your investment. Because one of the things that happens is, as we get closer to retirement, or as we retire, the reality is that we don't have the same risk capacity. It's hard for us to be okay knowing that big losses might occur in different years. And so as a result, most families want to move down on the risk scale, which is reasonable. Now, the thing that gets interesting though is, why do we have to move down on the risk scale? Because we are taking money. right? We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we have to sell low. And so as a result, we just make it so that all of our investments just don't have as big of a drop opportunity, so that we never find ourselves in a position where we're saying, oh my gosh, this is a really bad time to sell. So what that means is I want you to think about that for a second. Imagine, and I'm gonna go back to the different investment accounts here. So imagine we've got these different accounts, right? We've got cash, making very minimal in the bank. We've got an after-tax investment with $200,000. We have some IRAs of $100,000 on Beatrice, $700,000 on Ferdinand, and then they have these two small Roth IRAs, Beatrix, $100,000, Ferdinand, $50,000. I want you to think about this concept of bucketing. So if we had 3 buckets that look something like this, and we said, okay, so here's the plan, is we want to, we always want to make sure that we have money set aside here for emergencies, for whatever those might be. But then I want you to think about this. What if, out of those accounts that this sample client has, what if we dedicate some of those accounts to our income? With the idea that we have this separate bucket of money that's really meant for growth. Now, why is this important? The reason this is important is, why is one of the reasons why we really want to reduce risk in retirement is because ultimately we're taking money from our investments. But we don't take money from all of our investments if we do this right. We could just take money from certain investments with the idea of saying this particular batch of investments we don't need to touch for 10 plus years. Well, wouldn't that put us in a different position? A position where we can say, with this batch of money, we are going to let it be for a longer period of time. We don't have to touch it, which might mean you could take on a little bit more risk. So this concept was built into that scenario, which is part of why the green bars go up so much. But there's also something that's very interesting right here, because if done properly, there is this, what ends up happening is you kind of create this emotional wall, because all of your basics are taken care of. You have money for emergencies, you have money for lifestyle, and ultimately, isn't that all most retirees really want? They want to live the life they want to live, and they want to make sure that they have a backup. Hopefully, this kind of puts an emotional wall here so that we can put money in a different type of bucket with a slightly higher risk, because we're not going to think about it or touch it for a long period of time. And what ends up happening is we may end up slowly spending this money down, but 10, 15 years later, this has grown so much more, hopefully, that we can now say, okay, let's reposition our money and let's take some of this growth money and let's move it back into a position that's created for income. So I needed to get that concept out because that is part of what is built into this other scenario. So what ended up happening is one of the things we did is we took one account. We took this Ferdinand Roth IRA and we slightly increased the rate of return. And when I say slightly, the net rate of return that we built this out on is only 5 3/4. So 5.75% on that Roth IRA. And that's all we did. We kept everything else the same. And you're gonna see why this ends up being important. When we jump in and we start saying, okay, so what's actually happening here? Well, first of all, we took a tax-free grower and we just slightly increased the rate of return. So we can, right out of the gate, we can recognize, well, that's just gonna put more money in our pocket long-term in a really positive way because it's Roth money. And so that's the first thing we're gonna do, is we're gonna turn on our Roth feature. So we're gonna increase our rate of return there. The second thing we are going to do, and you'll see this makes a big, big impact. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to say, okay, now we want to take advantage of what we consider the current tax environment, which we believe is good, meaning we think taxes could potentially be on sale in this environment. Now, that sale does sunset. So the Trump tax cuts of 2017 does sunset in 2026. So we have just a little window there. We don't have a long time. This year and next year really is all we've got left for what we know today. And so the other thing though, as a reminder, is we don't have a lot of other income streams that are throwing income, taxable income, into the scenario. So what do we want to do? We want to consider doing Roth conversions. So we take money from the IRA, we convert it into the Roth IRA. And all we did here is we just said, you know, we want to just convert just for a few years. You'll notice these orange bars represent conversion. And so we just made 3 little conversions in this scenario, okay, while our income was low, and we did it out of the gate, just 3 of them. And what we ended up doing on this particular one is we converted roughly just under $100,000 for those 3 years, okay? So that was the other thing that we ended up doing. Now, lastly, and why is that important? Because we took money from a taxable environment, a taxable account, and we tried to pay taxes, or we paid taxes in today's tax situation environment, because it also gives us more certainty in the future. Because ultimately, if we can pay taxes in a tax bracket we know today, we're less worried about where taxes go in the future. And so we're not huge fans of just converting every dollar. There is this balance of conversion versus not conversion. And so in this case, I just did a very simple one, just 3 years of conversion. Now, the last thing we did on this particular situation is we just said, the other thing we're gonna do is we're gonna delay just one person's Social Security until age 70. So we kept Beatrix, we kept at full retirement age at 67, and then we had Ferdinand move till age 70. Now, and that is what produced everything else held constant. And that is what produced such a big difference. Now, folks, there's a lot of other little moving pieces that can be considered. And ultimately, what you have to decide is what makes the most sense in your situation. And so if you're sitting there and you're thinking, you know, I would love to have some individual help for my situation, there's a link down below in the show notes where you can get in contact with our team. Otherwise, we hope it was helpful to just be thinking about these things. And if it was, please share with your family or friends. And if not, we'll see you on the next video.